Okay, so I want to thank Ned and Jessica for allowing me to do something that I like better than everything else, which is complain. Let's see. I need to know the button to go to the next. Do I just?
Maybe right arrow? Is that?
It's just a PDF right now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, well,
All right.
scroll. Yeah.
Scroll. Ah. All right. There's no page down on this. Okay. Okay. So the first thing to complain about Python is that indentation matters. Now you say, well, this is all wonderful. It looks beautiful. The problem is that it's so easy when you're editing to introduce bugs. There's a lovely bug in this first piece of code here. It's a bug that the code still works, just doesn't work very well. And it's just because of indentation. And actually today I was trying to teach a 13-year-old to program in Python, and he was using an editor which I was unfamiliar with. And when he got done, it was looking perfectly good Python code, except for the fact that the Python interpreter wouldn't interpret it. It complained something about tabs and spaces and not being very confused. And I didn't know how to fix it easily because the editor I was unfamiliar with, I didn't know how to fix that. Anyway, so if indentation is such a great idea, then why not use it for using white space for basically everything? Like instead of using parens, if you wanted to say paren a plus b times c, just put the spaces that way. And if you wanted to say a plus b times c, you put the spaces that way. So anyway, I don't think it's such a great idea. Okay, now lots of operations in Python return none instead of what you might expect. And this, for me, violates the principle of least surprise, which says whatever an operation is, it should kind of do what you expect it to do. And if you say foo.sort, you might expect it to return the sorted version of foo. It doesn't. It returns none. This can produce a lot of wonderful, hard to fix code because you're sitting there and you're saying, why doesn't this work? In other languages, it's very often the case that things like that would return the obvious result. And I think that the philosophy in Python is that if something has side effects, it shouldn't return anything. I don't like that philosophy. Okay, now in Python also there are a lot of operations that really require try except for obvious cases that you'd like to make work. Like suppose I want to remove 3 from an array if it's there, and if it's not, I don't care. Well, I'd like foo.remove3 to do that, but it doesn't. It gives you an exception if 3 wasn't there to begin with. Well, obviously you can write a routine that does what I'm suggesting, but it would be nice if that was sort of native to the language. There's some dictionary operations that pop takes a second argument that says if it's not there, give back that. There isn't one for lists, as far as I know. Another operation that I would like to have happen is dividing by 0. I'd like to be able to get plus or minus infinity or nan when you divide by 0, but no, you get an exception, a divide by 0 exception. And as far as I know, at least without using NumPy, there's really no way to globally say when I divide by 0, I want to get in, use the IEEE stuff, which they work very hard to do, and why can't I use that? So in general, I think there should be a way to handle exceptions, fix on a global level, fix them, and continue. And a debugger would be great to be able to do that. Maybe there is such a debugger. I don't know what it is. If somebody knows of one that works that way, it'd be wonderful. One of the other things I don't like about Python is that there's really no guidance on how to make things, how to do things the right way. And one of the things about that I don't have any guidance about is efficiency. How some of the not so primitive operations, even like sort or something, well, I expect that to be an n log n sort, but what's the constant there? And there's really no guidance in that area, or how much memory something uses, or when things get garbage collected. So if you're really trying to write some efficient code, you're sort of on your own as far as I can tell. I'd like to know, like, what's the best way to do X for a given X. And yes, I can search Stack Overflow, but I'd like that to be part of the documentation. Debugging. For any debugger, I would like to see the ability to back up to an exception, fix stuff, and then continue. And this is something, as far as I know, doesn't exist in, at least certainly not in PDB, and maybe not in any of the debuggers in Python. It would be so easy in an interpreted language to really give you the hooks to do stuff like that. To be able also to interrupt a running program, examine and modify variables, execute functions, and then resume from where you left off. Ability to patch and redefine functions on the fly, ability to recursively handle breakpoints so that if you're at a breakpoint, set a breakpoint in some routine, call it, deal with that breakpoint. When it comes back, continue where you left off. And the last thing is sort of just an annoyance on my part, which is that I'd like to be able to redefine the debugging command so that when I have a variable named C and I type C, it doesn't just continue. One of my other pet peeves is incorrect precedence, is what I think of as incorrect precedence. A shift operation is really a multiply, as is kind of bitwise AND. It should have the same precedence as the multiply and divide operations. Bitwise OR and XOR are really the same kind of function as add. They should have the same precedence as add and subtract. And yes, I know C got it wrong, but why should Python have to copy that? Ah, yes, constants. I love constants, right? True and false, I discovered, can be redefined. They're not reserved words. Well, not that you'd want to do that, but anyway. I remember, yeah, float, inf and nan are not reserved words. So you have to say, if you wanted to do those things which are printed out as inf and nan, you have to say float in, float nan. And then lastly, something I just feel discriminated against. In complex numbers, j is used as the square root of -1. As a mathematician, I think I should be used as the square root of -1. I'm willing to allow the electrical engineers to use j. MATLAB allows both. Python doesn't.
That's the worst you could find? That's the thing that really?
Well, I think, no, it's just one of the many things. This is, you know.
Wow.
Now, Python and JavaScript, I'm using both all the time. And I always end up screwed because I've done one thing instead of the other. And here's a comparison of some of the things that are almost the same in Python and JavaScript. And if they were vastly different, it wouldn't be such a problem. But they're just almost the same. And lastly, datetime. Date and datetime are not comparable.
Finally, we agree with you.
And that's my list for today.
All right, we'll take one question, but no rebuttals.
All right. Since you mentioned that the assignment as a statement instead of an expression was something that was wrong, don't you feel like in C, where it's an expression, it leads to many more non-obvious buggy pieces of code?
That wasn't really a question.
I like to make bugs like that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Afterwards, definitely pile on. But